we have gotten to a point where if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And we're going to make sure that we have what we need, because for a long time, like the esports side of production has always been just use what you've got. And it's like, what you've got may not always cut it, but for a long time, a lot of companies were just like, this is just what we've got, this is what we've got to make do with. And now we're at a point where we're putting on these productions for these companies that their product relies on the events that we're doing. Like, the future of their product relies on this. It's like, we have to do the best we can, and that means doing everything with a standard for quality.
You've been listening to my friend Murray, and this is the Emotive Podcast. I'm your host, Dan, and I've been interested in esports ever since the early Counter-Strike days. I'd like to say that I played competitively. I think that's a bit of a stretch, to say the least, but I always enjoyed watching the competitions. And back then, it did feel like it was grassroots. It felt like it was run by gamers. It never felt very professional, but it was still exciting. The competition aspect of it was still exciting. Being able to be able to see the best of the best go at it live, that was still very exciting. And there was a shift at a certain point. I don't know what year it was when it started to feel more like the sports part of esports. I know that the term esports gets a little cringy, but after you listen to today's guest, you'll understand more how the lines are blurred in between the two, in between esports and sports as far as production goes. Murray is a guy who, he's just a self-starter. He just decided that he wanted to learn about production, and he just dove in feet first, Now he does it for a living. It's inspirational, I think, if people were to listen and hear his humble beginnings to where he is now. It just proves that if you put your mind to something and you provide enough effort, that you can do just about anything. And again, I want to say thank you to those who have been supporting the podcast. I've been hearing a lot of good feedback from people. If you want to get in touch with me about the podcast, you can find me at Emotive Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to see this podcast grow, share it with your friends, subscribe, give us a rating. All that stuff is appreciated. You can find all relevant links on our website, pod.co/emotive. And now, my conversation with my friend, Michael Murray. Let me just say welcome to the podcast. It's really good to get you on here, Murray.
Thank you.
Happy that you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule over the holidays. We're in 2020 now.
You came quick.
Yeah, and prior to this greeting, we had some experiences that are like everyday life for you. Just like you can't have a day off from like troubleshooting shit. You gotta to do an interview, you gotta troubleshoot your little laptop,
Yeah, I had it set up before it came out. I was like, it'll work, and then sit down and chart up everything that was working doesn't work, and it's like, why does this feel like every day of my life?
Yeah,
it's
of
like
course.
Right when you think something will work, something should work, it's like, nope, not gonna work. That's kind of like, it's all in the life, I guess.
Yeah, what is it that you do so people know?
So I am a broadcast engineer for ESL Gaming America. Been about 3 years now I've been with the company, and the broadcast engineer on our end, we have two in America, including myself, covering all of the North American events that span the country. We have some events that go into Mexico and go a little south. Anything in North America, for the most part, we handle. Some out of the country, we would have just an opportunity to work with another studio out like in Brazil, or we have other studios in Poland and Germany. Sometimes we would work with them as well. And what the broadcast engineer usually does is anything that has to pertain to the broadcast, live broadcast, or maybe it's a studio recording, anything that it's a camera, maybe it's a game that's being captured, mobile phone, a PC. We make sure that everything on the line is configured and prepared for the production line that comes in. And if there are any issues during the show, whether it's on the audio side, video side, network side, we pretty much troubleshoot that. And since it's live, things happen and it's escalate very quickly sometimes out of nowhere. I've seen some crazy stuff happen, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it's that those experiences, even some of the worst shows you may have, give you a lot of experience because all right, this is the worst that could happen. Sometimes it could get a little worse, but all right, this is how bad it could get. So you kind of always prepared.
And this is how you mitigated that disaster. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen some crazy stuff happen.
And we met, like officially,
the rodeo.
At the rodeo, the freaking DreamHack Denver, maybe a one-off event for DreamHack. I'm not sure if they're going to come back to Denver. They definitely didn't come back in 2018, 2019.
That was interesting, that's for sure. When I was told, we knew about 3 months in advance that the location was not really ideal for the tournament because, dirt and electronics, not the best combo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of great leading up to it and thinking like, well, we're really going to do a show on the dirt in the rodeo. And that was the first rodeo I've ever been to. So
yeah, this was at the, I forget what they call it, the Western Stock Show or something. It was the building. I like the what they call like the show floor or whatever, the place where they had like the booths and stuff. And
oh yeah, that was pretty cool. The way that
was pretty cool.
Worked it into the 3 different stages, pretty much.
Yeah, and they had a restaurant in the place too. That was neat.
I didn't even know that. I honestly, like, the only time I got off the floor was when I saw you. It was either that or when I'm at the hotel. Dude. And that show, that was one of the most. It was pretty crazy. That was actually one of the last Halo shows that we did, but I'd say it was one of the smoothest, ironically, even considering the location and everything, and the dog food manufacturing plant that's not too far. We realized that was a thing also, which was really interesting. The smells were like, you want manure or do you want like the dog food manufacturing plant? It's like, well, you get both right now.
Oh my god! I mean, it was a fairly small event in the scope of like DreamHack, right?
It was nice to have a console esport directly next to the big boys with CS.
Yeah,
have its own crowd.
Sure.
And we shared the main stage for the final day, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was actually so. The fun part about that whole setup is we have our production line on the main stage, which you saw, the Halo stage was like that one entire quarter of the rodeo.
This big rodeo ring, right? People can picture it like is that rodeo ring? You think it was like the size of like a hockey ring or something like that?
I'd say it's a little larger.
Bigger. Yeah, it was a little larger, wasn't it? Yeah.
And that was good because we had a lot of space for the players, for the fans to set up and to watch, even on the floor.
Oh, there was a ton of space for fans. Like we could have had a lot more, thousands more fans, probably, maybe a couple thousand more. But
yeah, I think
it was fairly well populated anyway.
It looked pretty cool, honestly. When everything was done, it was one of my favorite events, ironically, even though I actually screwed myself up a little bit during that show. It's like a whole fun trip, a little trip that I just like wiped out and took out half of my arm. So
oh man, like, you were just when I saw you were just like sweating bullets. You're like, oh man, you could tell you were like, what fires do I need to put out when I get back? You had like 2 minutes to talk, and then like
it was cool. The best part was, so we have the main stage and we do the first 2 days of the show. And then the fun part about DreamHack is that a lot of the time they want the finals on their main stage, which usually their main stage is set up the night before. So we had 2 days of Halo after we set everything up. And then the fun part is taking all of that, and overnight between day 2 and 3, you're moving all of that over to their main stage and redoing everything that you did in setup for 2 days. And you're pretty much doing this like whenever they finish around midnight until like 3-4 a.m. for a 10 a.m. show, and that was the fun part of DreamHack because right before that, there was a point at that show where I took a dive because it was pretty dark backstage and I wasn't paying attention to something. So I ran to go fix something and I took a dive. I landed on my arm and I felt like I thought I fucking broke something because it was all right at the time. And then by the end of the day, I couldn't move it. And I'm like, cool, this is the end of day one.
No.
I have my arm in a sling.
Like your forearm, or what was it like when you tried to?
I'd say it was from like my elbow up to my up to my collarbone. It was just
shit.
It was like I felt like it was a nerve or something that if I did anything, this pain was ridiculous. And I'm thinking, wow, this is one of the best Halo events we're having. And of course, it's like there has to be like one handicap that pops up, and it's like, cool, no. I have one arm for an entire show.
Damn.
And like moving around was so much fun.
Did you have that? I don't think you had that sling when I saw you, though.
No, that was when I saw you was about an hour or two before this happened.
Oh, was it? Oh, I see. Okay,
I went backstage after all that, and I was like checking up, and I was like, all right, everything's good. And then I think it was something like I remember I was like everyone was stepping away because we just had a long series, and everybody ran to go take a quick break to use the restrooms because we had like 5 minutes in between matches and they were running some media and something was a little loud. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go run over to the board and I'll just adjust that because it's something really easy. And I wasn't paying attention and it was really dark and there was stuff on the floor that I didn't see. So I literally started running and I remember my feet just like left the floor and I'm like, my feet aren't going back down. I'm going face first under a table.
Oh my God.
And I remember it's like the funniest, but it was so funny because I didn't realize just how much I screwed myself up. It's like, it's hilarious until it's just the end of the day. It's like, I don't want to move anything.
Like, how well represented was Halo at that event?
That was actually a pretty good showing compared to some of the other DreamHacks where the first DreamHack that I was on was the first DreamHack Atlanta show. This is the first Halo DreamHack. They had something like 80 teams when at the time they were only expecting around 30 or 40. It was like, oh, this is huge. Damn. And then that pace kind of kept going straight through the year. I'd say Atlanta was in the summer leading into Denver. And to have that many people playing a game that they weren't even sure about the future of was pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, man.
The way we brought everything in from the studio that we usually do for our pro league. So it's like, it was no joke with everything with the systems that we have in place for spectating because we have to capture all the consoles, which is pretty crazy because no other game really does that since they have all their spectator modes. One thing about Halo is like they like to capture every POV from every player as well as their like a player camera showing their reactions.
Whoa.
And it's pretty elaborate when you see everything that goes into it.
Yeah.
Because everything on stage has to run back to our production line. And to have that next to CSGO where it's actually a lot smaller setup, like that shows just how bulky it is and just how much effort they put into it. It's like every show is kind of like that. And it's cool to see that because I hate when we have shows where they just want to like go with a couple spectators here and there. And then you have to worry like, well, there's something wrong. Now you have only so many choices to go to gameplay. One thing that we have is redundancy across the board for pretty much everything. We need redundancy, whether it's gameplay, it's a camera, it's video, it's an audio feed. Like we have to have something redundant so that let's say something just drops, you have to have something to go to. And if you only have a couple sources, it's like, where do you go?
you go to some like default placeholder image, which is not good for spectators, or not good for the audience. Yeah,
it's like tech issue. Yeah, it's like that's what people want to see. So the good thing about Halo is that they covered a lot of bases, and that's something that we made sure that we would do for pretty much all the games that we covered, especially now when we go into we're currently doing a lot of mobile esports, and that involves. One thing is PUBG Mobile. We do 40 players in our finals, which is we've had 3 seasons so far. It gets a little crazy because everything's network wired. All the phones are wired. And yeah, It's a
That's
little
like
intense.
huge now. Like PUBG Mobile is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised because I was sitting there looking at PUBG itself, and it kind of started slowing down a little bit
Yeah.
because I guess it didn't have as much support from the
Mm,
teams, and then PUBG
mm.
Mobile just continued to just take off, especially in like Southeast Asia and everything.
Crazy,
It's
yeah.
huge there, and then I think they announced like $2 million they were putting into events this year or something like that for PUBG
Whoa.
Mobile.
Wow. So
I'm surprised how large that got.
yeah. Yeah, I want to talk more about the production side of it, like how many people are working on things. Just some like examples of things that I can picture, and you can tell me like what that looks like on the back end. But first, I think that your story of like how you got into doing what you're doing now without overblowing it and like make it into something bigger than it is, I think it is inspirational for people just to see like how someone like you got to where you are. It wasn't because you graduated from school with a degree in like engineering and all this other stuff. Like
Yeah,
you just kind of made it happen.
I honestly didn't even finish school to even in film, which is kind of great. It's ironic too because it's like I went in for directing. I feel like all the schooling it was great for like learning just the ways people. I went mainly for directing because I loved watching films and I loved the way that they were made. I pretty much picked up editing. Instead of jumping around, I'll go back.
Yeah, sure, man.
So when I first started playing games, one thing that I really liked was I saw people were creating clips well before the YouTube days, and I was wondering like how the hell are they doing these things? Because I used to play Tony Hawk Underground a lot. That was one of my favorites
Hmm,
before like all the Counter Strike and everything.
sure.
In between Counter Strike, some Gears of War is another game that got me into like the competitive gaming to kind of see what's going on. But I saw people were like capturing gameplay, and one thing I wanted to do is I didn't have a PC to be able to do it. I didn't understand how they were doing it. I saw the old TSN days for Counter Strike where it was like you were watching CPL 2001, 2002. You're like they didn't even have that great quality, but it was like I didn't understand how they could take the game that someone else is playing and put it on and maybe like an old flash player might be like really low res but like
Yeah.
how are they transferring this to us like I remember having to listen to like I have to watch a demo or I have to hop in the HLTV and then I have to
Yeah.
listen to TSN and hope that the video is caught up to what was going on on the radio on the
That was the thing, man. Yeah, you had to open the game, connect to the HLTV, and then sync up the audio with the streaming audio, and you just
oh
like
god
cross your fingers, like you said. But then with the streaming video, it was like just mind blowing. Even though, like going back and looking at that footage now, it looks like shit, right? But
oh yeah
it was what they were capable of doing, and the shoutcasting was very questionable, even. But it
oh
was like,
yeah
damn, you know they were doing what they could, like
yeah seeing people
Gottfried
like
and yeah.
yes oh man Gottfried that's what really got me going is being around Gottfried forums and just seeing all this stuff all this streaming blowing up we didn't know the numbers back then because there really weren't any metrics or anything. It was just people pushing a stream out on a CDN like Octus shape where it's peer to peer. Everybody's sharing the connection so that everybody
Hmm.
is able to just watch as long as enough people are watching. It's like almost torrenting the stream.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how it worked, so I sat there and I tried to like record with a DV cam or something fixed on the screen. I'm like, this looks like shit. I'm not a big fan of this. I started messing around with different things. I actually started trying to create signal flow out of VGA into a DV cam to record directly to a DV tape, but I was like, you can't play or anything doing this because it's like a shitty 1-inch screen that you see everything. I was like, this isn't gonna work. Eventually, someone showed me an old Dazzle, the old composite Dazzle with. It was a yellow, white, red connection. It's like if you can
Oh
convert
wow.
this to composite, you can throw it into this Dazzle and figure out how the hell the drivers work because nobody understood the crossbar, what the hell that meant. I started messing with that and eventually it was like, cool, I figured out how to convert this signal into something that people really haven't messed around with unless they're like transferring DVDs or like VHS to DVD. That's mostly what people were doing it for. And after that, I was like, all right, I found a way to take this content that I never knew how to capture. Like we started capturing PS2 games. I started taking that footage. I was like, I want to edit this, but I don't really know how. It's like I
Oh
literally
man.
looked at the footage and I'm like, I feel like I could do something cool with this. Listen to some music. I'm like, let me go look around and see what's out there. I started looking around torrents. I'm like, I don't have money for like Vegas or anything, so I'm like, okay, people say they use this Sony Vegas to edit videos and audio, and I'm like, I don't understand it, but it's like shit. If somebody uses it, I'm just gonna get it and I'm just gonna sit down and mess with it a bit. I didn't know how to take any clips and import anything when I first downloaded it. I didn't have a license, so I didn't. There was like some HD fucking upgrade that I had to do. I'm like, what does this even mean? I didn't really understand computers and everything and the programs back then because I was still kind of new to all that stuff. I was still the PS2, the PS1 guy that just my parents eventually got a PC and I'm like, I'm gonna start messing with it. I got it pretty late. It was like I'd say I was like 15 when I first had a PC around to like mess with and everything. I just didn't understand a lot of that with the editing, so I decided, all right, there was a new place that it was around 2003, I think, that I found out there was a cyber cafe that opened up locally, and I was like, I've never been to a cyber cafe, and I have a shitty PC. I want to go see like what these gaming PCs are about. I wanted to go there, and I was thinking maybe I'm going to run into people that like do editing and stuff, and I'll be able to ask questions and everything, and be like, maybe I'll find someone that'll like be able to help me figure out what the hell I'm trying to do. And I saw Battlefield in 1942. Was like that was the first PC game I really ever saw, like open world. I was like, holy shit.
It was mind blowing. Yeah.
I got an hour. It was like $3 for like 5 hours. I'm like, you know what? I don't know how to get around, but the UI is easy enough for me to get into the game and figure out like what are IPs? How the hell am I going to connect to someone's IP locally? Like, what does that even mean? People are like, just get in the game. I'm like, where's the fucking server list? Like, what? Like my big thing getting into production and just everything in that world was just getting to that cyber cafe and figuring out like I don't need a PS2 or anything. I just want a PC now because they had like 30 games. I was there when Half-Life 2 fucking released, and we had this cyber cafe.
2004 was Half-Life 2. What the heck?
Okay, so that makes sense now. So they opened in 2003. A year later, I got myself a job there. I literally worked at the bagel store next door. That was my thing. I was like this fat kid in the bagel store making bagels, and then it was like Christmas one year or like the week before Christmas, like, yeah, we don't need you anymore. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you can do this now? I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the damn cyber cafe and I'm gonna make them hire me. I was like, listen, I'll work cheap. I'll do hours. I started off just so I had time there when I wasn't working, and I played a lot. And getting into the tech there started making me understand, like, wow, now I could understand the computer. I could understand like what I have to do to get into editing, and I could I didn't have broadband at home, so it was like I could sit there when YouTube was just starting. I could start looking up what people are doing. I'm like, holy shit, there's this whole world that I didn't even know existed.
You kind of forced your way into an internship there in a way.
Yeah. And it was the best part was it was like a cyber cafe, and it was also a grill. So we literally it was like a restaurant / cyber cafe, so I lived there and I would just make food and I'd work there. So I worked there for like 4 or 5 years.
Oh wow.
And it was like I spent a lot of time there, but I picked up a lot, thankfully, just having all that time with all the games that came out over time. It was so weird.
Like, at what point did you know like what you really wanted to pursue? Was it like in the middle of that? Was it like before you started?
Yeah, I'd say like 2003-ish. The streaming and everything was still new, but now that I had the job with the broadband, I could watch the streams that I've been thinking about. I wanted to watch at home, but we didn't have the bandwidth. I'm like, I can't even keep up with this stuff. I had 500 ping hopping in HLTV. I'm like, I can't watch a game doing this. Now I could actually watch things. I'm like, I started getting more and more interested over time. And then eventually I started realizing, well, this competitive world that I see, they're doing all these events in the UK and Sweden and everything. I saw that it was starting to come up in America because MLG, I think they really started picking up around 2005. They started doing events, and I realized, wow, Halo 2 is pretty damn popular at the time when it was like really picking up speed right before it got crazy with I think 2006 was like the first major MLG event. I started seeing these events happening, and my friends were playing. They were still playing on their Xbox and PS2, and I'm sitting there like, guys, you gotta like play on a PC. What the hell? Like, there's so much shit you could do here. They're like, oh, just watch some Halo, play it a little bit. I wasn't the biggest fan, but I saw that there was a competitive world building up, and I'm like, okay, well, I've learned how to edit. I've learned how to get footage. What if I were to just start putting that together and trying to like create media that for other people, because I wasn't good enough to make content. I wasn't good enough to make my own clips. I sucked. So I started literally going around in Counter-Strike, in Halo, and just telling people, hey, give me footage. Like, if you're playing CS, give me a demo. I taught myself how to record the demos and how to edit the demos. I'm like, I'll make fan montages of people so that I could practice editing and everything. And it was like, that was how I started building my way into learning production, even though it's like a one-man band.
Yeah.
It's like still you're learning about like capturing media, you're learning how to catalog media, you're teaching yourself how to edit audio. So that I wanted to learn how to like take a clip and make it sound like the track didn't just change. I was like trying to teach myself how to go around loops and stuff. I wanted something, but I didn't want it to be shitty because I don't like I don't want to put out anything shitty because then I feel like I should just keep it to myself.
I mean, you had maybe source material to draw from, like things that you perceived that were good, that was good content at the time, but you didn't have like a blueprint of how to build it. Like,
yeah,
not necessarily. Yeah.
I didn't know how to do the effects that I saw, so I'd like sit there and I just mess with things like in Vegas, putting filters together on random shit and looking up like abstract art and animations to see like how I could find ways to like do additive develops and shit like that, because it's like I didn't know any of this yet. I just saw things I wanted to create. I'm like, how the hell do I do it? Like,
I would get so fucking amped, dude, when I saw a CS montage. It was like a pro, and it was like all like the After Effects type of stuff, and it was like, I don't even know. Like, if you watch it now, it's like way overdone, right? It's like not subtle at all. But at the time, it was like with the right music, maybe some like Evanescence or some like Papa Roach or whatever, you know, like whatever they put in there that was like cool. Of course, Linkin Park was like epic, you know, like you have some Linkin Park over it, and it's like, fuck yeah.
I've used some Linkin Park before, yes. Like, I know I have. I've used a bunch of shit. Cell Dweller was like huge for a while.
Cell Dweller was huge too. Ruination, dude. Ruination, come on.
Ruination, NOA, The Ancients was good. It was like one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Ruination was like the movie that made me want to do the fan videos pretty much, because I was like, holy shit, these are great players. I'm like, sure, I'll find people that are that good sending me clips. I'm like, they weren't all the best, but I realized some of those players actually did end up like from 1.5. They went into like Source and everything, and some of them are playing Go now. I didn't realize they're pretty damn good now.
Yeah. I mean, there was even like this tiny, like this Hard Clan made this video. Yes. And it was like, you remember that one? Yeah, it was epic, even though they were like just like this Cal Main team or something. But that video got circulated everywhere.
Also, Pub Masters. I used to.
Yeah, Pub Masters.
I got so into that stuff when it was just like a bunch of us just sitting there and like messing around. It was like, what dumb shit could we do that we've seen in movies? And it's like these guys did the craziest boosts and everything. It's like, I want to do that.
Imagine Pub Masters now. It would be so relevant. Oh my god, they'd be like superstars, right?
It'd be like memes. I feel like it would just turn into a big meme, because it's like, I don't know what, there weren't really memes back then.
Pub Masters were like the anti-competitive Counter-Strike team.
Yeah,
they would like just pull off just random stuff. So they'd be like
the 3-man stack.
Three-man stack running down the alley on train in CS, and it's like jumping off with the shotgun and then killing someone in midair, or they would just like pull off amazing shots, but they'd be like friendly fire, you know? They'd be like using the SIG to like boost themselves up and around a corner.
Oh yeah, because they could shoot each other to give like the boost of speed and the height. I remember some of the boots in like Cobble, they would do that. They would just hide in spots on CT that nobody would check and just sit there the whole round. That stuff was great.
I just remember the freaking the song that was like Magic Carpet Ride, and it was them like
yes. I wanted to replicate that stuff so much. And then I realized that it was just like not that good after a while. Like I would do videos here and there for people, but I'm like, I'm really just not that good. So
I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is our Counter-Strike, the leader of our clan at the time. He had this thing where if it was someone new, like a ringer or someone was coming in, we'd be like, hey man, we found this new trick on Dust 2. And this was in CS 1.6. Like there's like an X on the wall somewhere. And we're like, hey man, I heard that like if you shoot the wall in this one spot, it'll kill you. And he's like, all right. He's shooting it and shooting. Oh no, you got to move over to the left a little bit, down a little bit, down to the right. And then like when at a certain arbitrary point, he just like he'd like kill Archon, like kill him in console, so he thinks it actually works.
That shit used to be messed up back when we had our own servers, scrim servers and everything.
So then they would actually think for about 5 minutes that actually worked.
because doing it over and over.
Yeah, but then he'd be like, I don't believe you, and then somebody else would do it and he'd kill them in console. Oh shit, it does actually work.
I just have binds like on my numpad, just like kill people on the team.
Yeah.
We used to do that in like a lot of scrims where we would just mess with teams. We just like they wouldn't even realize we enabled cheats, and we'd be like flying around and shit, just fucking teleporting to sites.
Oh yeah, no, we would do shit like change the gravity and stuff in the middle of like the warm up. And there were some other weird ones you could do that would.
It was like the air friction.
Yeah, air friction. That was it. Yeah, that was the one.
You fly jump around and press back, and it shoots you forward like across them.
Yes,
like,
that's what it was.
Sight already. It's like, how the hell did you do that? It's like you disable it fast enough they won't realize.
We tried to use psychology, man. We would a screenshot round be like SS mid. We'd all buy HE grenades, and then we'd wait like 5-10 seconds, and we'd all throw our HE grenades, and then the screenshot round would be over. You know. Just like kill the whole other team. Nobody ever did it to us, but we did it to everybody.
I felt like it was against the rules.
Probably.
Like, you can't do that, man. This is a screenshot round, man.
People would get
on your screen.
People would get pissed. Yeah.
I tell them my smoke's not loading, and they'll be like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude. It's like I downloaded it. It's fucking not loading. I don't get it."
Oh god, interp and what 16-bit smokes on whatever other shit people try to pull.
Yeah, I was dumb enough. I did try a cheat once, and that's why I have a 5,000 day back ban currently.
Damn.
It's like, I think it's like 4,800 days. It's like 13 years now. Like my back ban's older than Fortnite players.
Wow.
It's like everyone got like interested in that. I know if you played a lot, you tried it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, way back in the very early on, there was this speed hack that really all it was doing was overclocking your CPU, and we were playing on software mode, and I'm not sure how the speed, quote unquote, like speed hack worked, but all it was doing was just like overclocking your CPU, and then you would just run faster. I don't know how that worked, but this isn't like Team Fortress. Yeah, I'm not even sure. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of cheating that happened. But I want to go back to, because you kind of talked about your first kind of job that put you on the path to, was there a time period in between that and that like first event that you got into?
The first thing I did when I saw MLG picking up, I went to an event, and I thought it was really cool to see Halo covered and everything. I didn't know anything about production, but I wanted to get into just esports. So after the 2006 event, I actually started going online. I was like, I like Goffrag. They wanted to start covering console events with their D-pad section. So I applied to do coverage, and it was pretty interesting. I started wanting to work towards the esports, and I knew that one place that I loved was Goffrag. I decided to apply for their D-pad console coverage, which was brand new in 2007. and I didn't know anything. So I was like, listen, one thing I was always good at was I was good at writing. I looked at editorials. I'm like, I could do this. I could do written coverage of these events. And
Hmm.
I thought, all right, it's going to be a lot of like online stuff. And it sounded really cool. And I realized after the interview, it's like, wait, they want me to go to these events and cover the MLG events. I'm
Oh,
like, holy shit.
wow.
Like, that felt like, yeah, it was a little over my head. But I'm like, you know what? Screw it. This sounds awesome. Like, why not? I asked for it. I might as well figure it out. Like, one thing that I realized is like, I want to learn something. I just got to do it. Like, I'll research something after I start getting my hands on it. I don't know why I'm
Right.
backwards. Like, I'll read the manual after I already mess with it.
You're not afraid to fail.
No, it's like, you know what? I probably failed. I could fail at anything. It's like, screw it. At least try. I mean, if it's something that
Yeah.
could really screw something up, I'll be a little more cautious. I'm not going to be as
Huh.
handsy, but I want to get my hands dirty because that's the only
Huh.
way I feel you could learn anything and get experience.
Yeah, did
So
you feel like this first event was maybe like a step above like what you were expecting? Well, obviously it kind of was, but you just like you weren't quite ready to be like on site, and you didn't even have. Did you have a
we
plan? Like,
were,
did you make a plan,
oh
or
my
was it
God.
just like, let's see what
So
happens?
I made a plan, and I had a friend of mine that we played Gears of War, which was what we were getting into in 2007. We loved Gears of War, and we were going to go there to cover MLG Dallas 2007, to cover Halo 3 and the first Gears of War event. Oh no, the second, because the first was in New Jersey, which I was already here for, so I was able to attend before we started working. And I had a whole plan, but I was dumb, and considering it was like my first gig, I was the guy that was like afraid of like, oh man, I want to try and help this company save a little bit of money or something. So I'm like, me and my friends want to do a road trip from New York to Dallas. We're like, how about we just offer that we'll do the trip to Dallas for the event, drive there to save them a little bit of money, because I'm like, they'll love me for trying to save a little money on this. And I was like, my whole plan that I had just went out the window when it was like traveling for 4 days straight across the country.
Oh
It was
shit!
so stupid. We got there and we were already shot because the trip down there took about 3 days total.
Oh my god!
And we're like, all right, we've pretty much not been sleeping, so now we start a 4 day event. And thankfully, like, I just somehow get like a second or third wind if I'm doing something and I just focus. So we got through the weekend. We even had like my first time ever using their back end for Gothfrag. It was like I didn't know my way around really because I've only done a couple editorials. I never used their stats or anything, so I'm like learning it as I'm trying to do it. And we had something where an entire bracket that we created for their 200 team open, something happened where the entire
Oh my,
bracket just disappeared. We had to
oh my
rebuild
god!
it like the night before, the night
Those
before they
fucking
started
tournaments
again.
were huge,
Yeah,
man. But even back then,
like
200,
Heat
Jesus.
9, there's like 60 teams playing. Like this is Heat 9. Like there's still 120 teams left. Like, what? You guys have been here all day long.
Wow.
That was when I first started learning. Like, shit's gonna hit the fan. You just gotta deal with it. Whatever happens. We had the EIC there, and Trevor Schmidt, who was one of the owners of the site,
Yeah.
he was there. That was the first time really meeting him in
Is that
person.
Midway?
Yes,
Yeah, Midway, right?
I
Yeah.
got to play on his CS account, which is 02 is his Steam account, Steam ID.
Wow.
I was like, holy
Guy's a
shit!
legend. He's
You
a
have like
legend.
you have the 2-digit number 2 account. What? How the hell?
That was like a big I don't even know, prestige thing to have a like a 4-digit Steam ID even, you
Oh
know?
yeah, I still have
Yeah.
an account with 6, and I'm like, damn, that's crazy. 6 digits.
Man, yeah, I have a 6-digit, but I purchased a 4 digits. Did I? I think I purchased one, which is really stupid, right? And then I had access to this other one because this guy he just like gave us his Steam account login. In fact, I think I can still log into that account, which is
You
so
probably have like
stupid.
16 years on it. I think
Yeah.
now, yeah, like
Oh, I do
16
too.
years
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
since
on
Steam
mine.
came out or something.
People don't even know what there's like back then. The Steam ID was a thing because you would like type in console like
You had to do status.
status. That was what it was, and it literally was like your status. Like if you saw someone had like a 7 or 8 digit, you'd be like, oh, that guy's a cheater.
That or it's like, oh, you're in Cal-O with a 5 digit. Like, all right, you're either cheating or you bought that from someone. There's no way you're still in Cal-O. It's like,
it's hilarious. It was like your DNA, man. Weird. It's weird. Nobody cares about that anymore.
No, it's all about
rank.
Definitely, it's just like how many knives you have or gloves and everything.
Sure, why not? I kind of derailed your story there.
That's cool.
But you went through that event, and like, what came after that? Like, well, maybe there was more to it. I'm sorry if there was more to it.
That event was crazy, but I guess the issues that we had that came up, I looked like I knew what I was doing, which was great because I was like literally learning as I was going. My friend after that event, we survived. We made it back. They thought it was pretty solid, the work I was doing. They pretty much put me in charge of like leading the esports coverage. So my friend bailed after that. He's like, I can't do this again. That was fucking crazy. I'm like, all right, that's fine with me. I'm like, I'll just try to throw people at the fire and see if they survive. I had a couple more events over time that like I had a friend that wanted to jump in, and he did a day, and it's like I didn't expect it to be like this. It's like, yep, no, nobody else did. Nobody ever thinks it's going to be this crazy. And we did that. I was working with Galfreg for another year and a half, and then they actually got purchased. I think after the 2008, they were purchased by MLG themselves. So we all fell under the MLG roof after that officially. Right. So now I was there working with the MLG staff, the editorial staff. No more just me and another guy working on a couple laptops. Now we're in backstage in production. Nice. I'm just doing my typing on my shitty laptop, and everyone, like, I see the show going on, I see the production line that they have and all the shit. I'm like, that looks so much more fun than what I'm doing right now. Like, I love these games and I love the people because I have to talk to all the players all the time, to talk like pre-event, post-event, during the event. That's kind of what got me around Gears for the most part, because I spent my entire life pretty much covering it. I hung around and always roomed with the production guys instead of like editorial staff. So I'd hear stories of what's going on. I'd always roomed with one of the TDs for the Gears of War and Rainbow Six Vegas 2 side of the event. And I sometimes would room with some of the CG ops that would be creating the graphics that they're using for the show. So I'm like in between everything, I'm seeing what they're doing, and I'm like, this is so much more interesting. And by the time I was done working with MLG, when they dropped Gears of War 2, I think it was 2010 was when they decided, after the last 2010 event, that they weren't going to be doing Gears of War anymore. I just felt like I really wanted to work on the production side of things more than anything. And in between all that time leading up to 2010, thankfully we had the growth of like Justin TV and the gaming section of that, which thankfully now the time has come where now I have broadband at home. I have my PC because I've had time where like I could start working on things. And now that I'm getting in production, I'm like, well, I know how to capture things in the past. I'm like, what are people doing, or what do people want to do in the future? Like, we haven't gone to HD yet, but I actually worked with a company, a streaming site called Ufrag TV for a little while, which that dude, if I would have known what was going to happen, I feel like no matter what, it was still worth the time. I worked with a guy, Shane Latham, who ran the site. And he introduced us all to the Blackmagic Intensity Pro when it was first released. It was meant to only capture on a Mac HD video so that you could edit in like Avid or whatever. Or at the time, I think Final Cut Pro was still pretty big. And he found ways to work with FMV encoder or something that we were using to stream. It was really...
This was for like recording or live streaming?
This was like for live streaming before we had all the XSplit and everything.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the name of the program, but we remember that he was finding drivers and we were learning how to use the Blackmagic Intensity on PCs, which Blackmagic did not have any, they didn't cover that at all back in the day, which was pretty funny when we were like, hey, this isn't working on a PC. They're like, yeah, that's kind of the point of it being a Mac product. Like, they literally had to start creating drivers before it really got popular so that we could use it on PCs to start capturing gameplay and everything. And it was like the first time we saw like 720 content going into YouTube and everything. And
Oh,
it wasn't
yeah.
really that big on Justin TV or on, what was it, live stream. God, all those sites back
Or,
then, it was like 640 by 360 was like, that's high quality, man.
yeah.
We were scaling everything, but it was like, it was so cool to see the quality difference at that point.
Yeah, there was, even prior to, people being able to produce things that were captured, like even on YouTube, people would point like a digital camera at their TV, and that was like acceptable content for a while. It's
Nah, that
kind of
was like
funny to think that it was.
it's
Yeah.
like that was the only way that people could think of it. It
Oh,
was pretty
man.
cool to sit there and be like, well, he's not that popular. He did just take hardware that nobody thought of using, and now it is pretty much paved the way for like all the Elgato gear that we have now, all the Decklink
Yeah.
gear that people use for like actual like full size encoders. Like I still see Blackmagic gear everywhere, and in
Really?
gaming production, and I feel like it wouldn't have happened if nobody messed with it years ago to see like
Yeah.
instead of using the dazzle like everyone else, it's like, no, let's try something a little beefier and figure out how the hell it works. And I feel like
Nice.
working with that, I realized like, well, you kind of can create higher quality content even if like the CDNs like Justin TV won't accept it. It's like just create it, and then when you can present it, doors will open, and you'll be able to start presenting the native quality that like now we have 1080. Microsoft is trying to do 4K press conferences on Mixer, and it's like it's crazy how 5 years ago we
Yeah, it
had
happened so
360p.
fast. So fast, man. You mentioned stuff about Justin TV and that, and I know that you've had a history with Twitch as well. Like, what did you like experiment with live streaming yourself around the time of Justin TV?
So a lot of the time I spent was watching people on Justin TV because it just kind of popped up out of nowhere, the whole gaming online thing. I didn't know about it one day, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, someone showed me, hey, Justin TV, you can watch these TV shows if you want, because they had stuff like Trailer Park Boys and all that crap, just like movies you
Right.
could watch. And it was like, I'd sit there and sometimes I'd watch like Hell's Kitchen and Kitchen Nightmares and stuff over there. And I'm like, it kind of kept me busy when I was working on stuff. And it was just like, it was cool to see all of a sudden the gaming pop up. And it wasn't really advertised, it was just a section, it was just part of the entire site. It was before they had their entire gaming portal and everything, before they even thought of going to Twitch. It was still
Right.
pretty small, but I started seeing people doing what I wanted to do. Just rather than editing, they're streaming everything live. And I'm like, crap, this is pretty cool. I would love to jump into this, and I want to see how people are doing it. That was around the same time that I started when I started helping out at UFrag, thinking like, oh, I'm helping this new site, it'll be cool. I picked up some stuff on like how the CDNs work in the back end, and then it just kind of fizzled out. But one good thing that I did from that, I got some connections with people in the tri-state area that we just happened to show up to it was 2016 Big Apple Con. It was a bunch of us that didn't know what to expect. We were going to do this live stream from Big Apple Con for the UFrag site, and I met a couple of people, including a friend of mine, a good friend of mine now, Captain Barbosa, Jason Barbosa, who
Oh, yeah.
he's been doing stuff in gears. We both kind of picked up gears at the same time and got into it at the same time, and we worked since then on quite a few events. And I really started getting into watching people stream. I wasn't much of a streamer myself. I just wanted to help them, since I started learning the tech before a lot of people did, with like the Dazzle and the Blackmagic and just the way that these streaming sites work with traffic and everything. I wanted to sit there and I would try to help. I wanted to be that mod that just is there to help at anything. I'm not one to really like put myself out there, like put my face on camera, because it's like I'd rather be behind the camera than in front of it, honestly.
I got you.
Which is why I do all the engineering now, because I could be off camera the entire show and it's great. I'm like, perfect, just what I wanted. So over time I was helping a lot of people, and we had friends of ours in the gaming community, in our community of like Counter-Strike players and Gears of War players that would start working with Twitch. And at the time, it was like, hey, look, I could help out with whatever you want. So I would throw my name in the hat. And if they needed help testing like the early Twitch launch, then it was like, hey, your account has this. Now we could start testing things before we release it to the public, to like the partner program and everything. I just got pretty much grandfathered in because I was just there to help. And that's honestly why my account is where it is, because
I see.
I don't do
Okay.
anything. I was just there to help.
Yeah.
It was fun because it was like I could do things that like people wanted to, and I could help give insight because I see other people asking for things. It's like I could try and be the voice for the other people that aren't that big, but they have good ideas. It's like
cool.
That's what I always wanted to do, is like build something bigger and be a part of something big.
Yeah, I wanted to know because like I saw people, you must have met some mutual friends. You have this like stream team, and the people are like on your stream team. It's like, who's this guy? Like I never seen his stream, but like what's the sleep team?
Oh God. Yeah, that was fun. That was when I tried, that was like a period where I tried to do streaming because it was actually in between a couple of jobs where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do really, and it was a burnout from working on a lot of projects that there was no money involved, and they all ended up just going nowhere. And it was like I really had nothing else to do. I was like, I'm gonna try to stream, and I was at a point where like my streams were terrible. I knew that. I had a day. I started living with Cream actually for about a year or so because we moved out. We were supposed to work on a project that never happened, but we were living together in New Jersey, and it was a rough time. It was a lot of things that we wanted to have happen that just fell apart. There was one night where, in the period where I wanted to try and do the stream, I passed out while we were like right after I ended my stream, literally at the PC, and he came into my room. He started my stream back up while I was asleep. There's a clip somewhere on the live stream fails. I was out. And he fucking put a horse head on me. I woke up in the middle of it. I had like 300-400 people in the fucking stream because he fucking forwarded it out on Twitter and everything. I'm like,
oh my God.
I had no idea. I fucking
Dude,
woke
I might have been in there. I don't know.
It was
been in there watching.
It was so
I remember
bad.
though.
It happened, and someone caught a picture of my face, and it was when the emotes happened. I was like, fuck it. I'm just gonna make a sleep team because that's the most popular thing I've ever done, is fall asleep on a stream. It's like
hilarious.
So we had a bunch of friends that I was talking to when I was still like watching streams, and I just threw invites because it was like, fuck it. I made the page because we still had access to like just make teams because they were still testing that functionality. It was like just messing around with that. It sucks because I don't have any time to see anything that is happening around those people. Like I feel really bad not being able to watch much on Twitch just because like that's pretty much my job during the week and the weekends and working. Part of that is transmission and making sure that the streams are good. So I just live on these other streams for the shows that we're doing, and I never get back to Twitch when I get home. And sometimes I feel like, what is going on now with these people that I haven't seen for 3 years?
Yeah, but you can always hit them up. And
yeah, and that's the one cool thing is like that's the one thing I love about the Twitch community. Like when it started, it was so small. When Justin TV created that gaming portal, there were only so many people that were like, holy shit, this is big. Everyone that was streaming saw it and they were like, wow, this is really cool. Everybody knew everybody else that was streaming. You knew all the names that were there when it started, like Swift and everything. That was one of the go-to channels I'd be in. And then when it took off into Twitch, it's like it just started getting larger and larger, but you still had your group of people that was like, this is really cool. We could still work together, and now we have all these extra tools that we could work with that we never had before. And it's nice to be able to see a lot of that growth. Like, thankfully, I've been able to see a lot of it. Since we're working with Twitch directly at ESL for some of our partners, we see some of the growth that they're trying to push and things that they're working on. And it's like, it's nice to still see new things coming out, things that
Yeah.
some things that's like, you had to mod a page, you had to like create a multi-stream page back in the day, and now it's like, oh, squads are out, and I'm like, that stuff is cool, like let's do more of that, please. Like this
Oh
functionality
yeah.
is
I
freaking
mean,
awesome.
yeah, it takes a while for things to come down the pipe, but when they do, it's always nice to see. And esports is a big part of Twitch's continual growth.
Yeah, I mean, without esports, I mean, what between
Yeah.
esports, speed running, what I love is all the charity work that's going on now. I love seeing people try to one up each other with the
Yeah.
charities, because it's like now they have really big names involved with it that are making money, and it's like, this is a significant amount of money for a
I
charity that
mean,
really
uh,
deserves it.
well, yeah, and for one, yeah, it's making that big impact, and two, what a better way to showcase, how great gaming communities are, and just highlighting the positive impact that it can have. That it's the total like opposite of like what some people try to represent gaming as, that it's just like this bad habit, or it's just for kids or something. But we're long past that. Like just showing like a GDQ event that can raise a couple $1 million, or even just like a single streamer now can generate a couple $1 million
Yeah,
for
but
charity.
Lupo
It's
get
like,
like 2.4 million or something.
yeah, it's
Like,
wild, man.
geez, we
That's
2.4
wild.
million in a year. You'd expect that of like any other stream community. Like, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
There's a story that you told me, and I expected it to come up somewhere, and it was maybe somewhere in New York City. You had this little event where you're like hooking up headphones.
Oh, okay.
Like, where
So
where does that fit in?
that's pretty recent. That's like 4 years ago, about.
Oh, was it?
So at some point for a while, when I wanted to get into production, I had a point where I was bouncing around different jobs, just trying to find my fit wherever I felt I could be. I started off back in 2012, like my first big like working on production was working. I flew out to Michigan, to Kalamazoo, which I didn't know it existed until I ended up in the city. I was there to work with company S2 Games, who did Heroes of New Earth.
Okay.
I was interviewed after doing one of our first Gears of War events that at the time, I think 2011, we had 10,000 viewers watching Gears of War 3, which is like, in 2011, you don't have 10,000 people in a room watching a stream,
No.
which is pretty big
No.
for us. So like that first Gears of War event that my friend and myself and Jason Barbosa did pretty much put us in a position where like now people were interested in us helping other companies, like developers that aren't sure how to build their esports scene or production. So I had an
Yeah.
interview with us too. I took that in November 2012, I believe, and I moved out to Michigan. I was there for about a year doing their esports production as well as their marketing production and game, like the hero reveals and everything, and special videos. It was like a year. It was the first time I really got to work with a team, and it was a lot of work, especially with, it was just myself and two of the casters that were in a room, which was originally, it was like a lawyer's office that they converted into a studio to
Oh
develop
no.
the game. It was interesting because like that was the first time I was really in the field on my own, just living the esports life, and it was a lot of work. That was when I first started doing dream hacks out in Sweden. Those were some wild events that I'll never forget. For like 2 years or 3 years straight, every summer and winter, we'd be going out to Sweden for one of the DreamHack events to do a Heroes of New Earth event. And it was kind of cool because it was like, oh, well, the events in the winter always ended up during Thanksgiving. So I'd be like, yeah, I can't show up to Thanksgiving. Got to go to Sweden. It's like, what the hell? What the hell are you doing out there? It's like, well, they don't celebrate it there. They keep playing games out there while you guys in America are like eating. Like it was interesting to like change that life. It's like going on the other side of the world multiple times a year was cool because it was like I got to see how people were doing things in other countries and kind of start connecting with other people that I would have never met in America, honestly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, that's how it was cool working with the DreamHack guys in America, because they're literally the European guys that just come here to do their events. So it was like, oh, I know these people. And it was pretty cool. And that's why working with the DreamHack guys in America is like, it's actually pretty cool, because like, I remember this. It's like going back in time and seeing these people I haven't seen for a few years, like, bring all the old vibes back when I started.
Yeah. Is like the ESL crew, the people that you see around events, is it kind of like a tight-knit group? Maybe on the production side, you end up seeing like a ton of people that you know?
So a lot of the time on the shows, depending on what show you're doing, they'll try to take the local crew that they have in, like, we're working out of Burbank, the crew that does that show, we'll try to fly them all out with that show so that it continues, the same quality, the same product, with the same people working with the same equipment, the same, the same run of show. But a lot of the time, all the other staff, there are so many different studios that send out people that I'll run into people from all different countries pretty much at one event, that all of them are doing different tasks for, like, let's say the mega event, like ESL 1 New York. They'll have production team from Germany. They'll have a production team from the UK, from Poland. They have all these different people that I've seen over time, but you never really see them all in the same place, because it's like some people are doing one show here, some people are doing one show there, bouncing around. It's like, the people, but you don't see them the entire time. So it's like a different crew every day, kind of depending on what is being dealt with. Because they'll have a crew for setup, and then they'll have a crew for the live show, and then they'll have a crew for the teardown, for rigging, all the different stuff.
Well, let's talk about like a specific event, maybe a particularly impactful event for you.
So this year, one of the bigger shows, probably one of the biggest we've done, we did the Apex Invitational at X Games this year, which was in Minneapolis. So that was the second time I ever did an event in the dirt. First was Denver. Yeah. The second was the X Games this year. Yeah. We were literally like if you're watching the X Games, where the big drop was, Big Air, we were literally right next to that. So like, we were seeing people dropping in on the freaking Big Air, and then we saw like the motocross bikes doing their jumps directly behind our stage. The entire shows, it was pretty wild. I've never seen anything like that.
So something like that event, you have Apex Legends. What is it? Is it like 3-person or 4-person teams? 4-person teams, right?
I think it was I think 12 teams of 4, I believe 60 players.
So you've got a match going on. Oh yeah, and for this it's like, let's say like 48 players.
Yeah, I think we had 60 on stage. I think it was like 4 sets of 12 on the way we set up the stage.
You've got all these POV cameras for all the players, right?
Yeah, so there wasn't a spectator client available, so we had to capture all 60 POVs on the stage.
What if there is a spectator client? Like, how does that make it a lot easier?
It can, depending on the amount of the amount of room you have to work with, like depending on the functionality of it. It really depends on how the developer wants to use the spectator. Like for Halo, there is a spectator mode, but they definitely would rather show the core gameplay, like the actual feed of the games.
I see.
Kind of like when you're watching CS, it's so much better to watch someone's demo than to watch an HLTV feed. It's dead on. Whatever's happening, you see it spot on.
Well, you hear the commentators sometimes in CSGO, they'll say, the smokes will be a little bit off if they're using like the Spectate client and stuff like that. And they kind of like mention that, they're like, I don't think that smoke is looking quite what it looks like on the player's POV,
Yeah, but at this point, I know for CSGO, it's gotten to the point where the spectator mode is definitely more than enough for them to work with. I don't really see any tournament organizers or production teams actually capturing the PCs anymore, because that could also lead to like performance, degradation in performance on the PCs if they're doing there's like all this funkiness with trying to take the 144 hertz or 240 hertz feed and try to down convert it, because you don't want to mess with the original feed that the player is using. There's like all this tech behind it that's a pain, so it's nice to just have a spectator client that has full functionality like that. When you don't have the functionality, it's like you're gonna err on the side of just capturing everything to be safe, because
Yeah.
that's going to be the best way to do it, even if it's the most expensive or if it's the most ambitious. It's like, where we work, if it's got to be done, you got to do it right. Like, that's the one good thing about myself and my coworker, the other engineer that works on these events. We have gotten to a point where if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And we're going to make sure that we have what we need, because for a long time, like, the esports side of production has always been just use what you've got. And it's like, what you've got may not always cut it, but for a long time, a lot of companies were just like, this is just what we've got. This is what we've got to make do with. And now we're at a point where we're putting on these productions for these companies that their product relies on the events that we're doing. Like, the future of their product relies on this. It's like, we have to do the best we can, and that just means doing everything with a standard for quality. Like, even you have to just kind of compete with the big boys when it comes to like sports production. If you were to compare it to anything, you want to have that same quality, because you don't want to be the company that has the event that just you can see, like, literally you have Twitch chat that could see what the difference is between your event's quality and like some other major event.
Yeah, it does stand out for sure. So going back to this Apex Legends event, you have all of the POVs captured. See, I'm just trying to set the scene so people can get an idea of what the production of just like one match is like.
Okay.
So maybe you could just go A to Z on it if you want.
So I guess one thing that we could consider is, for these events, they're in the stadiums, there is no room to set up a production line. So we usually work with a couple of different companies, truck companies that do sports events, because they provide all the technology that we need on the production side for the event. And they've worked with these arenas before and these stadiums. So if there's anyone that should know how to interface with like a venue, it would be one of these production companies. Like, we work with companies like NEP, which, if you're in production, they do sports around the country, around the world, honestly. We worked with companies. We do a lot of work with Ross Mobile, who do a lot of events. They provide a lot of the hardware that many companies use for their switchers and their routers, and for various CG and replay machines. They literally create all of this.
So this is like a TV production type of a thing, right?
Yeah, we were working directly with EA, and ESPN was the distribution partner. So it was pretty high profile for us, that's for sure.
So you've got all the hardware that you need to get this done.
So we would have a truck, which would probably have, I'd say at the time we were live, we'd have about 15 people in the truck.
A literal truck, right?
A literal broadcast truck.
It's like a mobile broadcast center.
Yeah, it's like a full RV, just with an extension that makes it double wide, with just all the hardware that you need for production. For the most part, all the hardware that you need for the show, minus the cameras that are on the stage or that are on their pedestals and everything, minus the 60 PCs that are on the stage that are being captured one by one.
Wild.
So you'll have 15 to 20 people in that truck. We had a stage with the talent that was about 3 floors up and across the entire venue, with another 20 people working on that, including the talent. The observer line had 6 observers watching. Oh no, they had 5 observers watching 12 POVs each, which would give us the 60. So they would literally be 5 people on comms with whoever the TD is, calling out numbers.
What's the TD?
So the TD is the person switching the POVs and the cameras and everything live. His job is literally to follow the action and put it on
as best they can.
TV. Yeah. So what he hears is 5 people, as well as the director, as well as a producer, as well as a replay op that's like talking about highlights he found and stuff like that, or asking for what's going on. He's listening like an audio guy asking for cues and stuff.
Whoa.
They have a second producer, in-game producer, that was watching the observers, calling out what observer you should watch.
Oh my God. Talk about redundancy.
Yeah.
So a question about the observers. So they got 5 observers watching 12. Each one is watching 12 each because there's 60 players.
Yes,
So
correct.
how many screens does each one of these observers have to look at?
They each had multi-view. So with the technology we have, we're able to take whatever feeds and make a separate output of just those feeds in boxes. Pretty much we can label
Okay.
them however we want within the actual hardware. And each of them had a 55-inch TV in front of them with 12 with the 12 POVs that were live and labeled,
Oh
and
my
they had numbers,
God.
and they had pod numbers and player numbers. And
So these observers are like just like kind of unsung heroes. They're like
yeah, they're working
they do it.
together, and they're also
Oh
working
my
with
God.
the in-game producer, and they're also trying
Yeah.
to work with the TD and the director.
Crazy.
There's a lot of stuff going on. That's like 20 minutes of just, if you listen to comms, it's pretty hectic because it's nonstop, just people
Whoa.
calling things out. It's
Crazy. Trying to make it look good and then like
trying to keep up with 60 POVs at
oh my
once.
God.
I think literally anything could be happening.
I have some comments on that, but also before I forget, this is one of the magic things because I watch a lot of Counter-Strike and
Yeah.
I always wondered because you're talking about the person who's just doing like replays. And
Yes.
I know that in Counter-Strike, shit goes down during a round, and then right after it's like, boom, we want to see the replay. We want to see the frags. Like if there's like a little 4K or something that happens, we want to see it right away. Like, how does that happen?
So the replay position is a full-time job alone because during the match, they're constantly skimming through the gameplay that they're watching. They have separate feeds as well as the main feed that goes out. So they have access to all the observers in CSGO that are in game. There could be 5 or 6 that are being used, but you only see a couple since some are meant for like a delay so that if you miss something, you could go back and you'll be able to catch that. Or some will be meant to be like a cinematic camera without like a HUD or something, and specifically just for like beauty shots and stuff like that. Like when you have like it'll cut out into a game and you'll just see like no HUD, but it's like it's literally a camera that looks like it's on a tether just flying around.
Yep.
Just specific observers for that. They'll have access to all of those, maybe 6 to 8 feeds. And every round, they're going through the kills. They're cutting the kills out. They're editing live pretty much. And every round, they're expected to have like a 20-second clip at the end of the round, just of all the kills, the highlights. Whoa. Sometimes it's not just kills. It's like great smokes or great plays that you have to know the game to like really understand it. And it's pretty. I've been working with on the Pro League, the ESL Pro League, for the past couple of seasons in North America. So I've been like literally with the TD and the replay op and the observers. And the one thing that no matter who steps in, you have to kind of have some background. And the one thing that if you ever see DJ Prius, he's one of the best observers that there probably is in the game because he's the most knowledgeable person, I'd say, of Counter-Strike from like top down. They'll sit there and before shows, their prep for the show is like going through previous matches to teach the replay op like what's important to look for. You literally have to research the game to understand what's happening when, because there'll be times where the observer can't call something out, but there's something that has to be seen and the replay op has to understand like that was important. You have to throw that in. That was important. They're preparing for the end of the round. They're preparing for the end of the game. They're preparing for the end of the show highlights. For the end of the show, like they'll have interviews that were cut that they have to also have prepared because a lot of the media, almost all the media goes through replay. So if there any video playback, they're also doing that while they're editing and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff going on, and the replay ops are, I know of quite a few that are very good, and they're like some of the unsung heroes because they catch things that other people don't, that you usually don't see.
So let's say something happens during a game of like Apex Legends. Do the highlights are going to come up towards the end of the game, right?
A lot of time it depends on like the flow of the show. The director and producer will be talking beforehand, and they'll discuss how they want to do things. Do they want to do a replay in game? Do they want to do a replay after the game? Do they want to do like a highlight of like strategy or something? Then they'll go into like, well, if we want to do the replay in game, how do we want to do it? Do we want to cut away from the game? Do we want to do like a 2-box with like gameplay still up, but the replay?
I like the 2-box.
And
yeah,
they have to create all of like the motion and everything with the TD, and go through all that prep before we even get to like rehearsal.
Oh my.
A lot of the time things are just done on the fly, but the good thing about having a good TD is that they're able, while you're doing one thing, they're able to start working on something else. Kind of like the replay op is, while they're watching one thing, they're also preparing something else.
Can you explain it to me like a dummy? Like how it actually goes from the editing rig, he's capturing the little 20-second clips and that. How does it get to the production line where it's like the live broadcast? How does it get there so quickly? Like, let's say it just happened at the end, like near the end of a Counter-Strike round, and all of a sudden they're like, boom, right up there.
So
it's like instant.
They'll usually have like 6 to 8 inputs, and they'll be pushing out either 2 to 4 to 6 feeds from their replay machine.
Okay.
Pretty much anytime there's filler, you'll see the 10 seconds of a camera in game just kind of hanging out while they're buying stuff, or you'll see them go to a caster to like fill in for a few seconds. That little bit of time is all they need to find a clip, create a playlist of the clips that they need to play back, and then they'll be like trimming stuff and making it as perfect as they can before it goes live. It's pretty quick how they just start the playlist and it just goes out, and hopefully everything is in the right position and everything is clipped properly. It's almost like using Premiere. If you've used Premiere or anything, like taking clips of videos and just having them play back in a playlist one after the other, but you have to trim it like within a few seconds at a time.
Wow.
Like the second you see something, you like mark it, you go back. Different replay systems require like different way that you would create the playlist and everything, but for the most part you'll have someone that's trained in whatever hardware you're using. That way you're not having someone on something completely new. That's like a whole thing before the show, that you're looking at the hardware that is going to be there, and then you're like looking for people that are compatible with that hardware pretty much.
Oh wow,
that's a whole job alone.
You'll even see casters will call out, they're like, I want to see a replay. Oh, can I see that deagle shot or whatever, you know?
So a good thing is while they're playing or while they're going through gameplay, a caster, or if there's like a slight break, the casters always do have the ability to talk back, or most of the productions, they have the ability to talk back to the director or to the line while like muting themselves from the actual broadcast. It's a whole separate IFB line, just so that he could ask like, hey, I want to see this before he brings it up, so that the TD or director or producer could say, hey, replay, can you get that? But he's got to have the replay op has to have a system that he could find exactly what they're looking for fast enough. It's intense. Insane, like it's just a whole system in its own that they have to create and pretty much manage media the entire show.
You're blowing my mind, man. Okay,
there's a lot of shit going on.
There's a lot of shit going on. Dude, this is not the job for me. My brain can't go in that many directions at once. No.
I can't either. I could work the replay, but I can't do a show. Like I would not be able to keep up. I could sit there and after the show, like give me a couple of days, I could edit something, but that's one thing I can't get my head into. Like, I don't know how they get their head in the zone on the day of the show when it's like they probably went through all this other shit. Maybe they've been doing all these other shows and now they just sit down on that one show and it's like, you have to be there. Like Apex, we had 2 different replay ops and we had replay assists as well because there were so many feeds to switch for the actual. Since we had all the POVs, it wasn't like they have a spectator client that they could capture, or a couple of those. They have 60 feeds that they have to switch to find highlights.
Oh my god.
So they had someone specifically switching for the replay ops just so that they could find the player.
Okay, so maybe you have, I'm sure you have some insight into this. I thought that early like PUBG esports, I thought that the production teams were struggling to get in sync with everything because it was just like, it's just a lot of moving parts, literally. Hard to really follow the action, hard to really tell like a consistent story because like there's so many different teams playing at once and it's hard to even like predict what's going to happen. What do you think has improved over time? And like, do you think that the battle royale with all these players could ever be something that's comparable to other esports?
I think Battle Royale is really hard to watch on a competitive level because, like you said, there is so much going on and there's a lot of downtime
That's
between the
true.
beginning of the game and when shit hits the fan. Like you'll have a 30-minute game, but the last 5 minutes will be action, or you'll have a clip here or there of a team
Yep.
running into another team without expecting it, and that's a lot of what you get for all of the battle royale. It's really not
Hmm.
easy to condense that. Like a lot of the free time, we did the first PUBG event that was, I think it was 40 players in the Oracle in Oakland, and that was all on LAN. And I remember we had 10 observers, but it was still pretty new
Oh
trying to
man.
find out how to like tell stories since the teams were
Yeah.
still pretty new. Nobody really knew. They knew the teams, but they didn't know
The brands,
they
yeah, but
didn't know
not
like what the
yeah.
game was going to present, how the players were going to present the action. It was still pretty new, and I remember it was a lot of the talking was like, show we want to keep up with action, but it only happens so frequently. Like you have to find something to fill in between. The good thing is talent. They're able to create stories from the past since they have some content to kind of fill you in before, kind of keep you interested until something happens. That's like the
Hmm.
big difference. Like back in the day, you could only fill so much when nothing has literally happened in the scene yet. But now it's like we've had a couple of years where now they can talk about like, well, we've seen these players in these situations at these events and blah blah blah, and how they performed in the past. Like that's a lot of help. And also like having statistics available is one
True.
thing to fill a lot of time because numbers, people love numbers,
Oh
especially if they're
yeah.
presented right. It's like you could fill a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes with all these numbers, and then all of a sudden you just cut to gameplay. It's like that looks good.
Yeah, that does help out a lot for sure. Do you see battle royale being something that's viable viewership wise for years to come, or do you think it's hit like a well, obviously like the PUBG mobile thing is huge right now, but
Yeah, the one thing with the PUBG Mobile thing is that we run open brackets every season. So we pretty much let anyone that has a phone play the game, put a squad together, and try to qualify for free, which opens up a lot compared to like these invite only tournaments that
yeah.
only certain teams, which you'll know the players, but those are the players you're going to see all the time. And I feel like stuff like PUBG Mobile helps because it opens the game up to anybody. You'll see different teams at different events because
Mm,
different teams picked up the game after seeing the last event and got and had enough time to get to a level that they could qualify, which is cool.
mm,
Like not seeing the same faces all the time is oh, it's a good thing because you don't want. It's nice to see like the veterans, but you also want to see like fresh faces. And I think one thing, if we were to go in any way with the battle royale model competitively, I really did like the way that they did the last Apex event, where it wasn't the standard you get points and then at the end of the game or at the end of the event, it's like which team had the most points. That's how you're seeded for the event. I think, like, I'm not sure 100%, but I believe at a certain point when a team got a certain number of points, they could pretty much knock out other teams during that next game. And it was like
interesting.
you could only win after a team hits a certain number of points, and then they have to win the game to win the event or something like that.
Oh,
So it was
okay.
like it was no more like, well, you're definitely gonna see 8 games, and then at the end of the 8 games, that's it. It was like now that you hit like a certain threshold, like all right, now one team qualified, they could win if they win the game. All right, now two teams
Oh,
qualified. Now if either of those two teams win, they could win the whole event. And then it got to a point where it was
mm,
like 17 teams all reached the threshold, so any team that won could win the entire event. And it was really
that's
cool
pretty
because you're
exciting.
like, holy
That's pretty
shit,
exciting.
anything can
Yeah.
happen at this point. It's like
But also just
watching
like
sports, pretty
yeah.
much. I really
Mm,
enjoyed that, but the only problem with that is just you never know how long it's going to go. So that
mm.
stream, I'm pretty sure that was one of the longer Apex tournament streams because it
Oh,
went
okay.
quite a few games extra than they expected, just because of how many teams made it. I feel like the map isn't. It's like condensed a bit more to the point where like you're always going to have action in certain points because you're always going to know that's where you're going to that's where you're going to pick something up that you need. In PUBG, it's kind of random where like you could run into a house and it's like last time picked up an M4, this time it's like, well, I got a can of something.
And that's the one thing, just personally with Battle Royale, you know, it going into the esports avenue, it's like, well, the RNG element is always going to be the thing that hurts the game somewhat competitively. So I guess like the scoring system is something that that they developed to kind of incentivize teams to get like more kills during games and that. But it's still like, if you can't loot up properly, then is it fair? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I understand that, because you could run into a house and not know if you're going to get the tools that you need to make it. Somebody else could just happen to drop somewhere that's like, oh, I just found something great, and it's like, yeah, that's not too fair. But it's like, I guess that's the draw. Even I had my parents come to New York to watch the ESL One New York this year, which was the first event I've ever brought them to, and it was cool. Like, they made it just in time for the finals in CS:GO, and I was actually able to start explaining like every round. They went through a map. I think it was Inferno that they were watching, but I was actually able to explain it, and they were kind of keeping up with the action. It was like, all right, well, I don't think I could do that with Apex or anything else. Or if you like play PUBG, be like, well, these guys are all going to these places for what reason? Well, they're really not sure. Like, they might get something, they might not. I could sit there and I could say, well, that guy got the kill, so now he could get a better gun next round. And they're like, oh, okay. And they see someone die, they're like, oh, they're done for now. Like, they can't do anything. And it's a lot more it's really basic, but there's a lot of strategy involved, which is cool.
I never like root against games to be esports, but I have a hard time as a viewer with BR. Maybe I gotta watch more Apex Legends tournaments.
There aren't as many for Apex, which is probably why not a lot of people have seen it. I mean, I think we had the Apex Invitational in X Games. We had an Invitational in Poland, and I don't think they've really done too many other events outside of those, because it's still fairly new, I guess.
Yeah, we'll just see what these companies want to put their money towards.
Yeah,
you know, we'll see.
I mean, the good thing is that it looks like they're trying to cater more towards the players, which is good.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather see content in the game for the people that are playing every day before the competitive side of something really takes off, because you need the player base. You need people to actually support your game competitively.
Well, what is your current favorite like esport? You don't have to list just one. You can just list a couple.
I guess one thing, since I'm really into Gears now, again, I'm back in it. I've been watching that lately, and they've been making some changes to their first event that made the game exciting to watch again and somewhat unpredictable, which it hasn't really been for a long time, which got me into that again. Man, that is a kind of tough one. I've been kind of outside of just CS and Gears. I haven't really been able to focus on too much. It's like when we have these shows all the time, it's like I honestly don't have a lot of time where I'll go home and I'm like, I really want to watch something, and I hate that sometimes, because it's like I do miss out on some great events. Like, I missed the Apex Poland event until I was able to watch a rebroadcast of it after the event, since we were doing something else, and that was probably one of the more exciting events I've seen in the past, I don't know, half a year. Just the way that everything transpired and the fact that it was something new was really cool. And I really want to see how that kind of takes off. That's probably going to be one game I'll be really interested to see in the near future.
Do you ever get time off? Like, do you ever get time off to like do vacations? Like, do you get burnt out? Like, do you just love what you do all the time? Like,
there's definitely burnout, because we'll have times where if we're not doing studio shows or we're not doing events, then we're preparing for the future. I mean, right now I'm finishing my vacation, which I take a couple trips out to New York during the year just to see the family this summer, winter when I can. But even now we're preparing for the new year, and there's work being done while I'm not there at work. Some new things that are being added and changed, that when I go back this coming week, it's just going to be like full speed ahead. It is a lot of work most of the time, because even when you're not, like I said, when I'm not doing the show and we're preparing, there's a lot of work in between just to work with, whether it's clients to make sure that everyone's on the same page, or you're working with vendors on your time off, or to make sure that they're on the same page with a show. We also have times where we'll have multiple shows going on at the same time in different venues, and sometimes it's two people covering four shows and we're splitting up, and
Oh my God.
it's crazy. Like the end of the year, December, I pretty much went straight from like December 2nd through the 20th. We had things going on almost every day in different areas that we were just on. We were pretty much on call. Anytime there was something going on, it's like we knew that something could pop up, and we were definitely challenged, but we survived. There's like spurts here and there like that where it just gets crazy.
You going to be doing this for a long time, you feel like? Is this your thing?
I feel like if not in esports, I feel like I could definitely be involved in maybe the engineering side of production. The one good thing with this is that it does carry into the sports world, because
these technical skills, I mean, that equipment that you have, those trucks and stuff for ESPN and that, they can just drive those trucks over to the freaking like a college basketball tournament or something, and do the same thing.
I mean, we had trucks that were coming out of the Stanley Cup Finals. The next stop would be one of our shows, and it's like it's crazy knowing that this, like, we'd be working with gear that's been around the world, that's done some of the biggest sporting events and some of the biggest theater events in the world, some of the biggest, like, go from the ESPYs to us, and it's like, what? It's pretty crazy, stuff like that. Just noticing that you're in the middle of that bubble.
Wow. Yeah, sometimes you kind of look around and you think like, damn, this is the big time. This is like the real shit. Like this isn't a small little LAN tournament anymore. This is like amazing how much growth. Like what year was like the big growth that you saw over, or was it just gradual growth over years?
I think once I got into ESL, it was kind of where I was at the point where I wasn't really doubting myself anymore, and like I could, like, what I could do, what I could handle. And that, like, I think that was like the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, when things just kind of ramped up, where it went from like we were doing these shows in these halls, and going back to the show with the headsets.
Yeah.
So that I was asked from a friend of mine who, ironically, this is a friend of mine that I've been helping out in the past, doing his own charity broadcast. I don't know if you've ever heard of Zach Weigel. He was the CNN Heroes. I think he was like one of the top 8 that he placed this past year. He does Gamers Outreach. He pretty much founded the company, and he runs Gamers Outreach. And one day he just asked me, hey, could you do an event in New York? And I'm like, I live here. And it was around the time when I was like, it was after the burnout of all these like small events I've been doing, where I felt I didn't really see anything coming out of it. I was like, you know what, I'll help out with anything. Why not? He's like, all right, well, come over. It was at the Best Buy Theater, Manhattan. And he was like, yeah, just help these guys. They want to set up Astros for this event they're doing. And I got there, and it was for the new Guitar Hero Live reveal that they were doing. And I didn't know until I got there. So I was like working with a company that was pretty much, their client was Activision. Like, could you just just set up Astro headsets so that we could set up these booths that were like, they were going to play the new Guitar Hero Live. I was like, I could do that. And then I just started asking. I was like, you need help with anything else? And it was like, all right, well, set up these consoles. So it was like, all right, learn how to use dev kits, learn how to like work with new builds of games, and how to deal with this, like whatever they needed pretty much. And that I went through that event. And the company at the end of the event was like, all right, what are you doing for E3? I was like, wait a second. Like, I just went from like setting up Astros for a Guitar Hero game to like, well, we're doing the Black Ops 3 reveal at E3, which was like, it was a 2-floor building with Black Ops 3, Destiny, Guitar Hero Live, and a couple of other Activision titles. They're like, yeah, you guys, you're going to be like the tech manager. I'm like, what? Like, how did this happen?
You just got a promotion, boy.
I was like, Jesus, I didn't even do anything. But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to say no. It's like, I might not know what I'm doing right now, but we'll figure it out.
There you go.
And I worked with them for like a couple of years. It was a company called Encompass that they've pretty much been doing events for Activision for years now.
Wow.
One of my events, I was a tech manager for the last COD XP they did, which was at the forum. They had one tent that was like 220 consoles just for Infinite Warfare when they showed that off.
Oh my.
And it was like, the cool thing about that was like, I was a tech manager, but they also had the influencer days where they brought in YouTubers and streamers to like record everything ahead of time with press. So I was like, shit, I'm in the middle of like exactly what I know. These people that I know what they're going to need help with. I know what they're going to be doing, capturing gameplay and everything. I'm like, cool. I'm like, that's that streamer, this YouTuber, that YouTuber. It was pretty cool because I was like, holy shit, like this one event just led to, I don't know, one of the bigger events I've ever done in my life. And
Wow.
dude, it was like 11 days setup and we were in the middle of the parking lot of the forum.
What the
For
heck?
like 11 days. That was one of the
Whoa.
craziest events I've ever seen.
But I mean, if you're not willing to just say yes, it's like,
You're not going to get anything. You're not going to learn anything. You're not going to do anything. That's what I learned.
I'm glad that you brought up the time with the hooking up the headphones, because I had a friend that I talked to here on the podcast, Vanguard, and he was somebody who he expressed interest in getting into that side of it because he's a total tech nerd. He loves the idea of being behind the scenes and seeing how things are run, and like being someone who is part of that process, and like your advice to people like that is like, find something you can latch onto and be involved, right? Whether it's on a volunteer basis or however it is, right?
I mean, for years, I would just literally try and offer myself to assist in whatever I could for events. I mean, that's what got me into GothReg and all this, like all the editorial work I did. That's what got me into production, is just providing myself and saying, hey, I could help with that, or I could assist, I could do what you need, or maybe I have something that I know that I could help make this an easier job or maybe more efficient, because I've just taken the time and just seen how people do things. And I'm like, every time that I see something, I'm thinking, how could I replicate that, or how can I do that better? Because I know that there's always a way to get yourself involved. Like if you want to do something, you can teach yourself, especially in this day and age where you can look up anything that you would like to. I'm literally at this point, I'm taking what do you call it, training and certification. And a lot of this training and certification is literally from YouTube videos on the YouTube of a company, where they just give you the training videos that they created and they're open to the public. And then at the end of the test, they say you pass, you fail from watching this. And it's crazy that all this knowledge is there if you want it.
Right.
I mean, if you want to do it, just do it. Like, don't sit there and worry about whether or not you can. Just think like, I want to do this, and I might suck when I start, but you got to start somewhere. That's what I've learned.
Do you need to be a self-starter, like someone like you is like jump into the fire, or can you be somebody who needs more direction? Like,
I guess in this world in production, you kind of got to be able to jump in the fire and like just kind of deal with it. You gotta be able to just to weather it a little bit, because you're gonna if you have to jump into anything, you have to be able to just, I guess, you have to grow a tolerance to it, because it's never going to get easier. You have to always think like, well, whatever's happening now, I just have to be prepared for the worst, because you don't know what the worst could be. And you have to be able to accept that, like, man, this could get really bad, and it might be something either really easy or really complicated, but you just have to have an open mind where it's like, well, no matter what, I feel like I could take care of this. You have to be confident enough. Like, I was never really that confident in a lot of things, aside like maybe the engineering side of things, because that was when I knew like I could figure this out, because I want to, and I will just make sure that I will figure it out.
Right.
Like if something scared me, I would just spend time until I do it. Like
there you go.
When I started, I didn't know a lot about audio, and there were shows where when I first started, where it's like I had to understand why something was happening, and I wouldn't take myself away from it until I understood what was happening and how to replicate it. And I would just sit down and just mess with things to the point where like I have to fix it. That was me with PCs back when I did IT work in the past, and it was like I learned all that from breaking things and figuring out how to fix it before my parents wanted to beat the crap out of me for breaking something
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, yeah. In the beginning, you weren't afraid to fail. You were willing to take a chance, and like you
Yeah.
kind of lucked into a few opportunities. But really, if you didn't make yourself available, then how would you ever?
I guess a
Yeah.
lot of it is luck, to be honest, because it's like some people that I know I wouldn't have known unless I feel like I would have been in the right place at the right time back then.
Hmm.
Like now though, I feel like I've gotten to a point where I just have to assert myself and just you have to push yourself to do something, otherwise you're never gonna learn, you're never gonna get it done.
Yeah.
And it's hard because like something seemed pretty daunting at times, and it's like even now I've learned a lot, but there's still so many things I don't know that I still have to figure out. And I'm like, the only way you're gonna figure it out is just put your head into it and just like force yourself
Yeah.
to learn it.
Well, what is the driving force behind you, like wanting to keep learning and iterating on your skills? Is it a desire to improve your position of what you're doing? Is it just trying to stay ahead of the times? Is it maybe preparing yourself for another role in the future? Maybe I asked the same question twice there, but
That's cool. It's I'd say it's a combination of wanting to stay ahead of the times and also wanting to be able to do other roles, because I always want to be learning. I don't like being in a place where I feel like I've hit the ceiling and now it's just rinse and repeat. Like
mm,
I don't want to be in that position where it's just the same thing over and over, because you could do that anywhere. You could work in an office and have that position. You could work anywhere and just you don't if you don't learn anything, I feel like it's just wasting time, and
it's
it
interesting.
wastes like it doesn't give you any opportunity to really excel. Like I
Mm,
started just doing writing, and then I went into IT because I wanted to learn about computers, and then that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to go into production. I wanted to learn how people edit, and then I wanted to learn like not how they edit, but now I want to see how they do things like the live shows and after learning that I wanted to learn, well, how does everything behind the live show work, which led to the engineering working around the line. Now it's like sometimes I know that with the engineering side there's plenty more to learn, but I also try to reach into other positions. Like I see people directing and producing, and sometimes I think, well, I would love to be able to put on a show like that. How would I be able to do that? And I try to take information that I see from these shows just so that I have a little insight. And sometimes I like throw an idea in here and there, and they're like, "Wait, they didn't expect that from the engineer guy." And it's nice to know, like, okay, well, I could actually have some good ideas in other places while I'm also learning on the engineering side.
yeah. I think that's an important lesson for really anybody who wants to improve their like position in their careers and really their life. Is like the work, man, the work
So
and
yeah,
the knowledge, right? Just keep it going. It's a lifetime of learning. And if the resources are out there, out literally, like you want to do it, make it happen, right?
yeah. I mean, we came up in a time where we I had to go if I wanted to figure something out. I'd have to go to the library and
Yep.
either find a book or an encyclopedia or hop on their PC and hope that I could find something on. We didn't have Wikipedia back then or anything. We didn't
No.
have half the Google search
Yeah.
engines that we or like
Yep.
any of the engines we had. You literally had to find what you needed.
Good luck,
Then you
man.
couldn't
Yeah.
plagiarize it.
Yeah, I had, we had the one computer at the school, the one computer at the library. You have to sign up for time. You'd get like a half hour if you're lucky.
Oh man, I remember by the time I got into high school, and that was when I was like starting to get into IT. A friend of mine and I found out the district-wide admin password information.
Oh no.
So we go into the library and we'd get out of like the what do you call it, the library UI, and we'd just be on the PCs, and we'd be like paranoid that someone's watching us the whole time while we're like messing with the PCs, and like they're wondering how like we're sitting there for an hour when there's like 20-minute blocks, and like what, how are they still going? And I was always paranoid, but I was like, you know what? At least I have infinite time to figure out what I need to. So I'm not in
There
any
you go,
rush.
man. Oh, we've been having some connection issues tonight, and in between when we were kind of uploading the previous file, I'd paged through my worthless notes that I had written like earlier last year, and there was a question in there. It's kind of a throwaway, but you've done so many of these events, and DreamHack is like one of the biggest events in the world, really, depending on where it is, right? It started in Sweden, right?
Yeah, I think I don't remember what year, but it was at least
Yeah, the
12
biggest
years ago, I
LAN.
believe.
It was like advertised like the biggest LAN.
It's massive. Like I didn't
Yeah.
understand that until I went to my first DreamHack, which thankfully
Mm.
was the winter, which is always the biggest
Oh
DreamHack
yeah.
that they have in. They have one in the summer, one in the winter, but the winter is always the largest.
Mm.
And I remember there was, I believe it's like 3 different convention halls that they fill with PCs. Oh no, 2 with PCs. They have multiple stages where they have like musical acts and everything and stuff going on through the entire event, since it's 24 hours for 3 days or 4 days. It used to be. And then they had one hall that was just for sleeping, an entire convention hall.
Just for sleeping.
Oh
Perfect for
god.
you. Perfect for you.
I never, that was one mistake, was not sleeping.
Oh no.
God, it's like when you're in another country for the first time and
Oh, the jet lag
you're
and
tripping and everything. It's like I remember we finished one show that was 2 days. The third day they went on the main stage and I didn't have to handle it, but I was already up and I was sitting at the booth and I just started tripping, and then because of being up for so long, and then I
oh
realized
man.
that nobody was speaking English around me. I was like, where am I?
Oh no.
It was one of those like, what is going on moments.
Oh shoot.
But yeah, when you go through that first hall and there's like an infamous escalator that goes down, but it oversees like the entire main hall, which
Mm.
is, it was like 15,000 people with PCs or something at
The
this one event.
BYOC.
Yeah,
Oh shit.
it was like 10,000 of those was in this one hall, and it's just everything's already going. There's lasers and light shows going on, and you just see fucking like a wave of PCs and people. Dude, it was the craziest thing I've seen.
I
I'd
mean,
say at an event.
the scale of that, you just think about it, it's like,
You never
wow.
think about it until you get there. You're like,
Yeah, and when you see it, yeah, the reveal, it's like, holy shit.
Man, that was, yeah.
And yeah, and then all of that on like lack of sleep, it's like overwhelming, I'm sure. Gotta keep your
Man,
cool somehow.
I'll never forget
Damn.
that. I'll never forget that first DreamHack. It was like,
Oh.
it was like the day after I got hired by S2 Games, so I literally flew out. I flew. So the way I booked it was pretty dumb. I flew from New York to Chicago, got on a train with my stuff to Michigan. That night, I didn't have my apartment because I had to get the keys the next day. So I stayed at my friend's apartment, who happened to be one of the casters that I just met that day. And then the next day, I got my keys from my apartment, put my stuff there, and then we flew to Sweden that morning.
Holy shit.
And it was like a week and a half of just us in Sweden. It was crazy. And they were like, we decided we were going to take, because I'm so smart, we're going to take the transit. So we flew to Sweden, then we hopped on a 2-hour train to the city, and then we hopped off the train, took a bus deeper into the city. Oh my god.
Whoa.
It was like the weirdest. I really don't know how we made it. And we didn't have phones because we didn't have international or anything. So it was like email once you get internet. That was like the only way we communicated with each other. It was so stupid.
Wow, but like you learn some lessons there, I'm sure.
Yes. Definitely
Oh,
not done things efficiently at sometimes. And
does anybody help you plan your trips or anything, or is that you're kind of on your own to get to the?
Yeah, for the most part, we have the company has like travel arrangements handled by an external company. Like we'll be able to pick where like airports we're leaving, we're flying out of, and we'll get hotel info, and we have ways to get transportation back and forth between airports and hotels and venues. Like they have that covered by the company. So pretty painless when we're doing that. It's honestly a lot of the traveling isn't even the big thing. It's like planning beforehand and just all the prep that's involved before is just the crazy part.
Not your own personal prep, like the prep for like the
show and everything for like equipment that we have to get going, and there are so many moving parts that's crazy. But honestly, like I just like doing things like now that I've seen live shows, like I wouldn't want to go back and start working on anything in post because it's like it's just so much better. It's such a better feeling when you do something right the first time live, and it's like you nailed it, and then it's like you may be busy, but then it's like the next time you're just thinking like, yep, we did it again, and then you just keep thinking like, what else did we do? It starts like tallying up in your mind. You're like, holy shit, we did a lot of things, and that's pretty crazy.
But you feel like your skill set could translate to pretty easily to other live formats too, and that might be something that opportunity comes up. It might be something that you'd be interested in the future.
Yeah, I feel like after what I've learned, the way things have gone, like I just like to say yes to many things because you never know where it's going to go. Yeah. There's only one way to find out. Like, why not? You only live once, and it's like, screw it. If you have an opportunity, just jump in, and if you don't make it, so what? It's not like it's going to spit you out, and you're going to be on like the side of the Jersey Turnpike.
Hopefully not. No, definitely not. Damn. Closing thoughts here. Do you ever feel like secure in your position, or do you feel like it could like end at any time?
I feel like where I am, like we're in a pretty good position because like esports in America, it's something that has to continue because you can't live with like one of the largest countries in the world just not being interested or involved like at a high level. Like you have to have these mega events in America so that they can also provide stability to events in Europe and Southeast Asia and all the other areas where esports is prominent. And I feel like with what we're doing, whether it's in esports or it's just in production overall, you're gonna like it's hard to find people that are also passionate about what they do that just do it for more than just a paycheck, because in the end it's like, yeah, the reason why we're still doing it is because we do love it, and that's why we'll probably go through anything just so that we can get it done and say that we did it and say that we were a part of that experience.
Yeah, it is an experience, that's for sure. Boy, you could probably tell war stories about all these events forever. We'll have to do that. We'll have to do some like real like specific stories, and the stories will just continue to happen because, over this next year, I'm sure you have a bunch of events to do. Like, what are some highlights you think for this year? Some big ones that are already in the works.
Oh man, one big thing is going to be our ESL event in LA, which we've never done before. I think it's going to be at the Shrine Theater, which is pretty big, and we've seen it. It's like, it's kind of scary.
Whoa.
But yeah, that's going to be an interesting event because it's Dota 2 as well as our mobile games, which includes I think it includes PUBG with the 40 players, which is going to be always fun. It's like the hardest part is trying to find out where you could put these people.
What the? Wow.
And I know one thing that was announced last year was we were doing an NBA 2K. We were doing NBA 2K events, which we're going to begin this year working on as well, which is going to get interesting because I've seen them in the past. Actually, when I came out, I think last summer, I was able to see the first season of the 2K League, kind of go behind the scenes because a friend of mine was working, and it was really cool to see. But it was like, man, I wish I was involved in something like this directly backed by like the NBA and 2K and everything. Now it's like, all right, now we have our hands on this, and this could be really cool to work with.
Oh yeah.
Everything. This is always something new. I'm just wondering, like down the road, who knows what'll pop up. We've had some surprises come out of nowhere, and it's like all we could do is just, all right, we got to buckle up and just get ready.
Halo's still kicking in 2020.
Yes, I see. That's going to be interesting to see because it's going to be 2020, and then they're going to be prepping for Infinite, which will be kicking up next year, I'm sure, since I think it's releasing around the end of the year. Scarlet, or I believe,
Mm.
or the new Xbox System X, or what was it called? I
Yeah.
forgot.
Yeah, I forget. It's confusing.
It's another
X.
Xbox.
There's an X in there somewhere.
Honestly, Halo esports could be interesting since they're going back to the games that were, they were loved and they were very popular. It'll be cool to see some of the old names and some of the new players and play the older games.
If there's a competition, if there's money there to be won, there'll be some competition. People will show up.
That'll definitely be interesting because it's going to be weird though not being behind it, because we were doing the Halo for the past couple of years, and I guess now it's going to be interesting to see how they change it from what we've done in the past. But that's always nice because now it's like it gives another team the ability to put their own spin on what Halo esports is, and that's always nice to see.
It allows you to kind of branch out and work on some other things, not always be doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I like is when I'm following something, just picking up on what other companies do, and just like I said before, I try to find a more efficient or a different way of doing things, just for the sake of trying to recreate it myself and try to learn that process. Like, it's nice seeing another company take something that you worked on and see how they do it and say like, oh, that was a good idea. That was a nice addition. That was a good change. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to. It's like fresh eyes on something.
Yeah, absolutely. So final question, I guess, for people that are just like watching esports, like what's a good game for somebody to get into, like if they've never watched it before? Like what in 2020, what do you think is like a good game for people to watch if they've never seen?
I feel like the safest bet, pretty exciting, I'd have to go with Rocket League without a doubt.
Yeah,
it's so simple. It's three guys trying to hit the ball into the other guy's net, into the other three guys' net. It's like you can't mix it up. You can't get confused. I mean, it gets pretty intense. That's for sure. Yeah. And that's something that was actually, we've done that in the past for collegiate style, and that was one of the more exciting games we've covered, because you just don't know what'll happen once you have like the higher level players just doing crazy stuff, and you could still explain like, oh, all they're trying to do is get the ball in the net. You can't
pretty much, but the maneuvers are insane, man.
Oh yeah, it's like when you get to CS where it's like, how they do that. It's like, all right, now there's like a deeper level of explaining.
Exactly. Well, hey man, you know what? There's just like, this is a rabbit hole, dude.
Yeah,
we'll have to go. We got to go further down the rabbit hole next time. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks again, man. And I don't know, people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
The go-to would be at Marizzle on Twitter, is where I kind of spend a lot of my life fanning the flames of the Gears drama, which I enjoy watching, and just keeping up with the memes whenever I can, whenever I'm not watching esports. I wish I stream more, but I don't know. I'm just I'm not, like I said, I'm not the kind of guy that is really good at being in front of the camera, so I try to stay behind. But if there's anything ESL America, I'll probably be somewhere plugging something in, or I will probably be trying to fix something at some point if you're watching.
There you go. Hey, wow, I don't know what to say, man. This is really fucking cool, though. I learned a little bit, and I'm gonna have to re-listen just to process all this information. But
Oh yeah, sorry, I was all over the place, but just as it came back to me, it's like, it was nice to think about, though, especially going back.
Well, this is where we say goodbye for now. Music in this episode is from the artist Data Rebel. Audio mixing, mastering, and wizardry by the one and only TipsyJack. Editing is by myself, orangesherbet. You can call me Dan. Coming up next on Emotive, Story Time with Lou, Part 2. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up in January. Thanks for listening. I'll see you soon.